Hi, everyone. It's Alexander Fernandez with another edition of Video Games Real Talk. I hope you're doing well. Happy Chinese New Year, first off. Happy Lunar New Year for those that are celebrating out there. We have an amazing guest today that I am so happy to have her on the show because I've wanted to have her on the show since day one. And honestly, Jenn, thank you for coming. Please introduce yourself. What are you about and what's going down?
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me here. It's very exciting to be part of the podcast. I love the work that y'all are doing over here. And it was really fun when we were on my podcast. So very excited to kind of hang out. My name's Jenn. For those who don't know me, I do lots of things in the industry. I'm partnerships coordinator for Women in Games International. I am a talent manager for TyrusTV. I also do TTRPG content creation. I'm a streamer. I am all over the place. So I am as much in the gaming industry as I can possibly get my hands into.
I mean, you do like literally everything in video games.
Yeah.
So we need to unpack this because you know what? It's very rare to meet someone who is so into the nucleus of video games. I mean, into everything, talent, development, obviously organization, helping to make this industry better.
Yeah.
But before we get there, I want to know your story. You're a gamer through and through. I mean, I think you are literally a gamer. I mean, I think it's straight up. I mean, there's a Pikachu behind you, and I know you're like I literally pale in comparison. I'm like old man gamer, but honestly, take me to when you first picked it up gaming, and like how did you get into it? Like how did
Okay.
that all happen?
This is, I always start. Let me take you back to a time in 1988
Oh
when
my god,
VTech
88.
released a edutainment system, which I don't even know if that term was coined yet, called Socrates. And so I was born in South Korea, in a very different South Korea than anybody has access to now. When I was born there, it was the 80s. There was martial law. It was like not the happy-go-lucky K-pop, K-drama, dance that it is now. And hold on a second. Um, uh, it was very different. We had dirt roads. I lived in a space that had like brown running water. Air Force bases were just being built at the time, and my father was stationed over there and met my mom and had me. And then I spent the next 9 years moving back and forth between Korea and America. Living the military brat princess life. I would, my dad would be gone for a year or two at a time, or I would have to deal with moving around a lot. So video games for me have always been like that stability. Like I didn't have a childhood home. I didn't have childhood friends I've known since elementary school. Like, so for me, it was Mario. It was Nintendo. It was the dog on Duck Hunt that would laugh at you every time you
Yeah,
met.
no doubt. That dog, I swear to you. I swear to you. I swear. I mean, that dog has more lives than a cat. I mean, it's still
Yeah.
alive.
That thing.
Seriously.
I can still feel the hee 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 like in my brain.
I think we need to cue that in the edit. We need to bring the dog pop up and just
Yeah.
laugh at us both, and then it goes back down. That damn dog! I swear to you.
Oh man. Yeah.
You said something I find interesting because it's like Korea in the '80s, martial law. I mean, this is something I think everyone's got to understand. It's like Korea is not the Squid Games, K-pop, amazing, country. I mean, obviously it
Right.
is now, but back then, I mean, you're talking about having witnessed Korea from its roots, going
Yes.
from what effectively was a developing nation
Right.
into the superpower that it's become, or effectively one of
Right.
them. One of the G8. So, I mean, what was that? I mean,
So it's
what's that like? I mean, because honestly, like you literally just described an emerging world economy
yeah.
that a lot of people don't know. So,
So
yeah, take
the
us there.
the biggest question I get as a first generation immigrant person is why, especially nowadays, right? And even Kim's Convenience had a little bit about this. Like, why would your parents choose to settle in America versus Korea? And if you look at Korea now, like that's a very valid question. But when I was there, it was not that way. In 78, the president was assassinated. There was a big military coup. There was lots of protesters being massacred. thousands upon thousands of them. And it wasn't even until recently that the Gwangju massacre was even recognized by the government, until the new president that they have now. So this is a very different Korea. A very different Korea where, you know, I grew up with stories of black vans and lots of censorship and things like that. So it's really easy to see when you look at Korea in the 80s why my mom was like, nope, we're
Yeah,
not messing with this.
absolutely.
And then you add in the fact that I don't pass as Korean. So as a child, we had to move. Like there were times, not just because of who my dad was, but also the fact that, like, oh, your mom married a GI, or oh, like you're clearly a mixed person, like you don't belong here, kind of thing. So we had to move apartment complexes, which was rough because my parents always wanted us to live off base so that we could have as much tie to our culture as possible. But then that also subjected us to racism from living in Korea, and also racism from living in America. So it wasn't until I was in 5th grade and we retired that I realized that I was really different from anybody else, because I had always been surrounded by other military kids that were either in the same position as me or also mixed. Yeah, so that was a huge culture shock.
No, I mean, I'm serious. I mean, and I think you nail on something like that. It's like, as a first generation immigrant, you know, in either side, being mixed, basically not looking at the stereotype that people assume someone looks like to be from a certain place. Like,
Right.
oh, you don't look Korean. Oh, you don't really look American, or you don't look white, or you don't look whatever isms they want to put in there.
Mhm.
I mean, it can mess with you. So I can understand why gaming, it's stability. It's
Oh,
like,
for
you know
sure.
what? It's like, that damn dog may laugh at me, but it laughs at everybody. I mean, it's like, it
Right.
doesn't matter, right? So
Right.
let me ask you then. So you're playing video games. I mean, did you finally get a Nintendo? When did you get a Nintendo? Because like,
I got a Nintendo when I was the Christmas of 1989.
oh my gosh, man. I mean, seriously. I was 8. I mean, I remember.
I was
Wow.
four, just turned 4,
That's
maybe.
a well, that's a good gift
Yeah.
for a 4-year-old.
Yeah, I used
That's
to. Well,
amazing.
here's the thing. So my dad was super supportive of my gaming career, which if we talk about accessibility, it's a big thing that I talk about, because I had access. Nobody stopped me from gaming at all. And even as an adult, I still took myself out of the running as I got into high school, like with competitive Halo and things like that, because I didn't see people that looked like me. But backing up, my father was always very, very supportive of my gaming habit as a child. So I always had the latest games. I always had, you know, when the Genesis came out, I got a Genesis. I didn't have a Super Nintendo, but I had friends
Oh,
that had Super Nintendos. And, you know,
but
we
you know,
do like
Genesis
the,
was good. Altered Beast and all that was pretty rock and
yeah,
roll. So I
yeah,
mean, come
yeah.
on,
This
yeah,
is true. I mean, I was happy we didn't sleep on it. But also, you know, I grew up in the Korean church community
yeah,
locally, like once we
yeah,
retired. So like someone had a Super Nintendo, someone had a my mom's best friend bought us our PlayStation, and then she bought like the games, you know, so she would work it
yeah,
out with the Korean community, because when you're when you live in America, you know, you need that cultural tie, you need
yeah.
that
You do,
that thing,
yeah, you do.
for sure. So yeah, my parents were always very, very supportive of I had a computer in 1992.
Wow,
In
man.
my house, I played
Wow.
Wolfenstein 3D and Police
As
Quest
one
3,
does.
and of course, at eight
Wait,
years
hold on a
old
second.
in
And yeah, I was
Korea.
gonna say, I was like in
Yeah,
'93. I mean,
yeah,
so it's like you're an 8-year-old. You're like, let me just load up, like, let me load up Wolfenstein. So you're command
yeah,
lining. You're in DOS. You're
yeah.
basically command lining
Oh
this,
yeah, I was in basic language
dude.
by 3rd grade.
I mean, seriously, you're like literally the future foretold. You were the ghost of Christmas
I
future,
was a
which is
ghost.
basically a computer programming for all. Everyone in there. You're 8 years old, learning how to code. You already know how to do it. That is,
Yeah.
your dad did a great job, and your mom
They
too.
did.
But
Yeah, they
honestly,
did.
that is, I mean, seriously, that's super
Well,
awesome.
my dad, so during the 1988 Korean Olympics, my dad was called to go back to Korea, and I was in America, and my mom, they were, you know, there's a lot of things that people don't talk about when it comes to interracial and intercultural relationships that I think is a whole other episode it would take to unpack all that. But anyway,
No doubt.
he was in Korea. I was in America. My mom was in a different part of America. I was living with my aunt and uncle, and he started going to what we were Amerasian orphanages to like you know, because he missed me or whatever. He wanted to donate, he wanted to hang out. He learned the history of the culture of mixed people in Korea. And by the time I was 5 years old, I knew my context in the world. I knew about the war. I knew about, you know, the orphanages. I knew why they were
Yeah.
built. I knew how I existed. And that in and of itself was a privilege that I think a lot of mixed people and even people that have ethno-cultural ties that live in America don't have.
I totally agree with you. And I think that's one of the things, knowing where you're from and how you happened and how people around you happen, it gives you a huge advantage. It actually helps you understand where you are so you're not lost. And I think that's something that is extremely important. And, I want to ask this thing about basically there's the local Korean community that basically had all these, well, basically gamers. You had basically, you have Genesis, you have Nintendo. When you see gaming, do you see that as a bridge towards your own cultural background? Was that a tie in there? And, if so, talk a little bit about that because I mean, obviously, a lot of people listening may not, they're like, well, what do you mean? I mean, I grew up in, apple pie America. I have no idea what you mean by that. Please explain that a little bit in terms of what that meant to you.
It's Well, it's all encompassing, right? Because the gaming culture also ties in cosplay, you tie in anime, you tie in all of these different like Asian centric things. One second. Like I'm whistling right now. I'm like, yes, I understand that.
No, it's cool. We all have, I mean, listen, this is great because you have kids. I mean, this is
Yeah,
how it
no,
is.
and
This
you
is
know,
what it is.
exactly. And that's fine.
Yeah, no worries.
I just want to make sure he doesn't need me for anything. But yeah, so growing up and bouncing back and forth between Asia and America, like I watched My Neighborhood Totoro when it was first out. You know what I mean? Like Korea did a really good job in taking Japanese media and taking out the Japanese parts of it, and then just showing the other parts that were relevant.
I love how you just snuck that in. We were embracing Japanese culture, only wasn't from Japan,
I
It's
couldn't,
like,
yeah.
so wait, hold on.
Like,
How did they present that? Were they like, oh yeah, there's this new anime coming from America?
Sailor
It's like,
Moon.
so, really?
Yeah, so Sailor Moon I saw on Korean TV when I was younger. But they had edited out anything that tied it to Japan. So they would change the scenes or like take certain scenes
Yeah,
out and like put
yeah,
other scenes in that took out anything that like Japanese writing, anything like that. Because they didn't want to offend anybody in Korea, which as
yeah, makes
I don't
sense.
know, you
Yeah,
mean.
history. Yeah, no, I mean, well, I mean, this is video games real talk. We talk real. I mean, history happens. I mean, it's the
Yes,
reality. So, I mean, yeah, I
absolutely.
get it. I get it. I mean,
So
and for those that are listening, that are too young to understand, open a history book and you will find out why they did that.
not an American public school history book though. There's really not a lot going on in those. There's maybe a
What
sentence.
do you mean? I thought we were welcomed with open arms. I thought that's how this happened here. I thought we just
I
showed up and walked in and said, "Oh, there's no
would
one living in this continent. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and let's be industrious." No, I
right?
understand.
No, you like, and that was the biggest culture shock. Not even just growing up having access to technology and having access to games and coming here and finding out it was like a weird niche back in the 90s. Like I was weird for liking Studio Ghibli movies. Like that wasn't
Yeah.
normal when I was growing up, you know? And it was
No,
like,
not at all. I mean,
no,
you were
and
like
it
a
was like
nerd, total nerd.
I
That's
was a
that's
total nerd.
total nerd. I mean, I was there.
Yeah.
I went and I saw Akira when it came out in the theater, and then I saw it again when it was re-released again. Went out to Salt Lake City to basically get that one copy that we could find with original language translation. Me and my nerd friends that literally look like the kids you would never talk to.
Oh,
Totally
right?
different. Yeah, totally
Right?
different. Yeah, I know, right? There you go.
So
But
like we had to Napster stuff. We had to like BitTorrent things and like
well, I mean, you're connecting to it, and so let me ask you this question then, because you're growing up with video games and you're bouncing back and forth between cultures. When did you realize that this is something you actually want to do for a living? Was it always? Were you just like, you know what? I'm 10.
oh,
I'm gonna do this. Was it always?
always. When I was younger, it was I'm gonna play video games for the rest of my life. And my parents were like, okay, sweetie, like whatever. Okay. You can
every
think
parent's
that.
dreaded dream right there.
All
I'm just gonna play
right.
video game.
So my
Oh my
dad
god.
was like, but the way it was presented to me was they were very supportive when I was growing up until I hit about high school. And then it was like, okay, now you need to get serious about something. What are you going to get serious about? And I was like, video. What do you mean? What do you mean? do you mean? And so then it started being pushed like, well, you know, the stereotypical, like, you're gonna be a doctor, you're gonna be a whatever, you know, lawyer, what's your thing? So the on the other side of the video game culture, for some weird reason, we're seeing this overlap resurface, is the true crime novel lovers, right? Like, there seems to be a tie between
No, there
as
really
nerd
is.
culture gets bigger, true crime culture gets bigger. So not only was I playing Wolfenstein 3D at the age of 8, I was reading true crime novels and had like 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 it's probably a weird obsession, but there's a family murder in 1978 or something like that. It was Jeffrey McDonald supposedly murdered his entire family, and this whole big stuff. And that I could talk a whole episode about all the stuff that has to do with the evidence. And I was involved since I was like 9 years old. I was obsessed with this one case. I don't know why, but looking back as now I have an 8 and 9 year old, I'm like, I would never let my 8 9 year old look at those evidence pictures
Probably
or read
not.
them.
But
These are like nighttime stories, right?
did you ever play Deja Vu on the Nintendo system, the original NES?
No, I
It's
did
a
not.
so Deja Vu is a true crime mystery. It literally is like you know, think about it this way. It's like you have to like point and click to solve the murder and basically what happened to you, and it's brilliant. You should like literally look it up, Deja Vu. But it was there. You're like, of
Well, I
all
will.
the
I
things to
will.
put on there, and it was all about crime. And you know, it's the first time I heard about like getting roofied. You get roofied in the game.
Oh
I'm
my
like, what in the
gosh.
world? Yeah, I know. It's like the craziest thing. But that was one of those things. So when you said true crime, I'm like, oh yeah, that's been part of video games since day one. It's like crime.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
you
I
go.
mean, really, you're either stopping it or doing it. Either
Yeah.
way. so
Okay, so wait, you're in high
so
school. Your parents
so
are
high
like,
school.
get a job or study something for real. So what does that look
Yeah,
like?
study something. Now, mind you, because of I switched back and forth between schools so much that my grade levels weren't in sync with what I was actually learning, and vice versa. So I ended up skipping kindergarten and going straight into first grade at 5 years old. Plus, my birthday is in December, so it's a really late birthday. So I was 13 in high school. I had been with these peers ever
Wow.
since I was growing up, but I was a year ahead. So I wanted to take a gap year and take a year off and kind of go travel and do whatever. But that was not something my parents were very happy about. So I said, fine. The only other thing I'm interested in is dead people. So how about I go to school? We were living in New York at the time, and Hudson Valley Community College actually has one of the few funeral director slash mortician things um, schools. So that was one path I was going to go down. And I ended up
Wow.
going to SUNY Albany for forensic chemistry. Um, and studying forensic chemistry for a few years until I was like, I don't want to be stuck in a lab. And I made the mistake of making my physics and chemistry labs on the same day. So I'd be in lab for like 6 hours a day. And I was like, no, I don't do this either. So I kind of went into management after that because I couldn't think of what I wanted to do that wasn't somehow tied to gaming. And I had felt like I had missed the mark by the time I was out of college to jump into something that was gaming related. I felt like there wasn't space for me, that I didn't see anybody that looked like me there. I didn't really have access to, as much as I had access to the Korean culture, I didn't have access to the gamer culture because
Yeah.
after high school, my parents didn't understand why cosplaying was a thing or conferences or conventions. That like wasn't in my path with them. So it wasn't until I was like 30-ish that, have my kids, have my family. I'm sitting in my corporate management job, doing my scheduling and stuff. And I'm looking at the store manager ahead of me. And I'm like, I don't want to do that either. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, that's
Yeah.
my path. And I don't like that path. I don't like where it leads. I don't want to be working 60 hours a week at, in a corporate office job with all of these people managing. I loved my crew and I loved my team and I love supporting people, but I wanted to pave the way for my daughter who told me that she wants to be a content creator, she wants to be a streamer, she wants to be, all of these things, she wants to play video games. So I pivoted real hard and real fast. And I don't recommend anybody doing what I did because I just jumped ship. I was like, I don't have a backup plan. I got
So wait a
nothing.
second. You're just like, I'm gonna go. You're like, okay, I'm 30 years old. My daughter wants to be a content creator. I look ahead of me. I see someone that I don't want to be. So you know what? I always dreamed of making games or being in games. I'm jumping in.
Mhm.
It's a lot of guts, man. I mean, you're
I
yeah, that's a lot. I mean, you literally took it all on.
No path, no idea what I was going to do. I just
Wow.
knew that what I was doing did not fit. And I understand that there is a crap ton of privilege in that because I had a partner I could rely on that was also, able to get a job while I was figuring it out. Like, so I don't say this lightly, because I know that there's a lot of like coaches out there that are just like manifest your best life and like I don't necessarily subscribe to that, but I was in a position where I just couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't handle being in a place where I knew I was wasting my time.
Yeah, well, you chose for yourself, which I think is the
Yeah.
most important thing. I mean, listen, I mean, whether you have the privilege or not, you made a brave decision to say, you know what, everything I'm doing right now I don't like.
Right.
Therefore, I will jump into something that at least makes me happy. At least I
Yeah.
get happy when I play it. So let's
Right.
see what. Okay, so take me through that conversation that you're like, corporate job, see you later, pick up the controller, and now I'm gonna basically like, what were you thinking? What were you gonna go do? Were you like, I now have the power of like, what are we? Were you holding an Xbox? You're holding a PlayStation 2. What control are you holding when you're like, this is what I will become? Like what? Like that? This is your Excalibur? No, I mean I'm
Right.
seeing this
I
moment in
just
my
like
mind.
reached out for my Mjolnir and that's what popped in was a
There you
controller in my
go.
hand.
There. I mean, it's just like here you go.
It was I felt like I had been on my way out for a while. I was going through the motions. I was making really decent money and I was allowing the money to dictate what I was going to do in my life.
You mean like
And
an adult?
yeah, and
You're,
especially when you're the eldest
yeah,
of
yeah,
four,
yeah.
as the eldest daughter in an Asian household, like
And you have kids. Let's be clear. It's
oh
just
my
like it's
gosh.
done. It's not about you anymore.
Whoa,
It's like
whoa.
it's
You
yeah, I
worked
get
that
you.
60 hours a week. My
Hmm.
mom built a business cleaning houses from nothing. So she's like, she didn't understand that that was my motivation. I was like, well, you built a business from nothing, and dad built a business from nothing. And I helped him with that. So, I mean, obviously, I'm fine. Because my father and I ran a private investigative business while I was in college. So,
Wait, what? Wait, you were a PI in
I was a
college?
PI in college. Yeah, I was an 18-year-old licensed New York State private investigator when I was in college. Yes,
I mean, this
yes,
is either basically something that should be on the Discovery Channel or it should be its own movie right there. It's like 18-year-old PI. It's like forget Magnum PI. It's like
yeah.
this is much cooler.
I had a okay. Ready?
Wait,
I
yeah,
had
please. I mean, well,
an
yeah, tell us.
Oldsmobile
You're
Cutlass Supreme,
you're shitting me.
black on black.
You're
That was my
kidding me.
first car. So I
You're
would be in downtown Albany or like in freaking Troy, New York, just like don't open the doors, lock all the windows, like scared out of my mind because like there's certain
yeah,
parts
it
of New
goes
York they
deep.
know if
Yeah,
you're not
no,
supposed
yeah,
to be
yeah,
there. If you
yeah.
look
You're
like
not
me,
supposed
like
to be.
yeah. And they're like I don't know how many times I had to make sure my license was on me because cops would be like, "What the hell are you doing here?" And I would be like, "Oh, I'm supposed to be here," or like but it was great because I would walk into like for one example, there is a diner owner. His wife was cheating on him. She was cheating on him with a patron of the diner who would come there every day for lunch. So I just walked in one day and started flirting with the dude behind the counter, and he gave me all the information that I would have ever needed to know for the case.
I mean, this is actually incredible. I mean, it's like, literally, it's like, you did the shakedown. You shook it down, but just basically like, let me go ahead and talk to you. It's like, so, okay, let me just ask you something. I mean, that takes, again, even more guts because I can imagine and that puts you in a position where you're not really scared of anything then because I'm honestly, you're dealing with people and their emotions and anything that can happen to them. I mean, this guy's wife is cheating on him, so I can imagine he must have felt pretty horrible on that one. You're in dodgy neighborhoods, you're driving your Cutlass Oldsmobile, which we can talk about in a second, because I mean that right there took a lot of guts to drive that. Do they even make that car anymore? I don't think the Oldsmobile
Oh,
is even a lot.
it
It's
was
gone.
$600. It was my graduation present from high school.
You know, that's a good gift. I had a 1981 Toyota or 83 Toyota Starlet, $600 too.
Oh, yeah.
That was my first ride, you know.
Yeah.
But okay, so all right. So you clearly know how to communicate, because to be able to shake down the information from the guy behind the counter, I mean, you might as well be in business development at that point. That's pretty much biz dev. You just explained biz dev right
Yeah.
there.
I mean, for real,
Wow.
right?
For
So
real.
so
For real.
I think one of the biggest problems is just to just segue a little bit is when we're talking about taking our skill set, we're never talking about our whole skill set. You know, it took a lot for me to realize that like my
Totally.
ability to move in between cultures, my ability to have these world experiences, my ability to stand up to social studies teachers who failed me on tests because the history I learned was different than the history you learned in America. All of these things were things that I was discounting in my work experience in order to move myself into a path that I wanted to go on.
No, absolutely. So then when you told your mom, you're like, I'm doing this. And what did she, yeah, I mean, I got to ask you, your mother, bless her soul, she's sitting here being like, I put up with all the BS of America and going back and forth, and my daughter wants to make video games. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, take us there. What happened?
So I love my mom to pieces. She's a great harmony. She's a great oma. She's done wonders for me, and my sisters. And I, what was that, baby? Yes, she always gives you rice and seaweed. Yeah, my daughter is like, she always gives me rice and seaweed. Um, but so what I had done was I knew I had all of these skills, but I knew I didn't have the skill to present myself as if I had all these skills. So I had been following a life coach for a while, and I had been lucky enough to get into like be nominated for her free programs and be nominated for like free conferences that she was doing. And her name is Amber Lillystrom, and she's amazing. And I called my mother and was like, can I borrow $2,000 to enter into her program to learn how to better position myself in the career that I want to be in? And that 24-hour negotiation before she was kind of like, okay, fine, I hope you don't fail.
Wow. Yeah. Well, she made you work for it, is what you had to justify it. You had to get, I mean,
I had
that's a lot
to.
of money, man. I mean, let's be clear. I mean, I know your mom felt. She knows what that it took to make that. Oh my gosh.
The best part of the negotiation piece was think about all the stuff you could do with that money for your family. And I was like, well, I am, but are you going to give me the $2,000 like just on my own to do what I want with? And she's like, well, no. And I was like, okay, then. So can I use it to invest in this and I can pay you back later? But then once she had seen what obviously the results of that, she's like, you know, take it as me investing in your career. And I mean, she tries really hard, tries really, really hard. But like, I know it's tough for her to let go of the mentality of what it takes to be like a hardworking blue collar
Yeah.
worker in America. You know, she sells cars for a living and she's amazing at it, but she works 70 hours a week. So to
Yeah.
her, she doesn't understand that like you could potentially be making similar money or the same money in a position that you love without working gazillion amount of hours in order to do it.
No, I totally hear you. And I mean, that's the immigrant experience right there. It's when I tell my family, like, I get paid to talk about games and make games, and it doesn't even sound like a job, because I mean, I come from a background of cleaning and laborious work, and it's hard to explain to people who do real work what I consider to be real work. Anything physical, anything taxing. I mean, I sit on my ass and basically talk crap, and I get paid to do it. And in a very
Right.
fractional way of putting it, in a very sarcastic way. But let's be real. I mean, the
Right.
hardest thing I do is think. Oh, poor me, you
Yeah.
know. And so I
Yeah.
get it. I mean, I totally get it. I mean, but you know, we're fortunate to get there,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. So I think that's also one of the reasons why I find it so fascinating hearing your story, because it's you jumped through many places to get to here. You saw a lot to get to here.
Right.
So you know, when you finally got into this industry, what were you doing? Like, and please, what has it been like, so people hear the reality, right? This is not
Okay.
a privileged story. I mean, please. Tell
Okay.
us.
All right. So I got a free ticket to PAX East. Uh, so what happened was I made the decision that I wasn't going to do my job anymore. I went and had a conversation. Me and my store manager were not getting along at that point because the way she had gone to her position was different than how I felt. You know, we just clashed a lot. So she was fine with it. I went from driving 40 minutes to work to driving 5 minutes to work and working part-time. I was like, I'll step down to part-time. I will give you guys time to find somebody. Like, I will train whoever. Like, and, you know, I'm not trying to screw anybody over or just walk away. You know, I was like, let's do this in an amicable way. My sister works for the company that I was working at still too. So I'm like, let's be cool about this. And so during that process, my friend was like, hey, I have an extra ticket to PAX East. You want to go? And I was like, sure, let's go. Let's do it. Let's go. I called up the Harmony, had her watch the kids, didn't tell her where I was going.
Watch my children. I'm not telling you where I'm going.
I'm like, I'm just going to Boston for the day. Like,
Oh, makes
don't
total
worry about it,
sense.
right? Like, it'll be fine. It's fine. Took them, left them at home this time. I have taken, like, when my son was 6 months old, he went to Boston Comic Con with us. So, but for PAX, I was like, I want to be able to explore and really, you know, enjoy myself. So there was a panel being done by the Geek Family Network, specifically geekdad.com and geekmom.com. And they were talking about integrating gaming into your parental plan, and how you can use TTRPGs, video games to level the playing field between you and your child, to give your child a little bit more control over the relationship dynamic, and just different ways to incorporate for neurodivergent kids. And I have 2 neurodivergent kids. So I was like, let's go. So I went. And at this point, I had kind of started a little bit of a blog. It wasn't anything crazy. I just felt like there was a lack of supporting the women. There, whenever we had talked about women video game characters at that point, the discourse had always been like, these are all the reasons that they're wrong and they're bad, and these are all the reasons that we need to fix them, right? Like Lara Croft, we need to fix. Princess Peach, we need to fix. All of these things. Except the conversation of that innately leaves out feminine characteristics of these characters. So I started this little blog that was just me, myself, and I, about like why like Coco Bandicoot was really freaking cool, and like why I really related to Renoa Hartley as a military brat, and how she was like the first character that I felt seen as, or how like Sniper Wolf in MGS is like one of my favorite women characters of all time, and like the boss, come on, like what are we doing? So my conversations wanted to be a little bit more on the positive side of like, these are all the things that we're doing that are good, and these are how we can amplify that, instead of focusing on like the bad side of whatever. And for the record, I love Princess Peach and I love Princess Zelda, and I think they have their own positions in the gaming industry, you know what I mean? But anyway, so I went to this panel. They had this conversation, and I don't know what compelled me, but I was literally like, I'm gonna go talk to them. And my partner's like, for what? And I'm like, I'm gonna go see if they'll let me write for them. So I walked up to the editors and I was like, hey, here's my shitty little blog. Can I write for you?
That's amazing.
And they got back to me a few months later and they were like, yeah, sure. Totally, we'd love to have you write for us. And I was like, okay. And I had been kind of like, so I started writing and blogging in the gaming industry. I had done some like email marketing here and there for a friend of mine that works in like the marketing industry. And like, I had learned a lot about like, you know, just outreach and things like that through that. So I started blogging pretty heavily for this blog, and like doing reviews and like getting free games and getting free board games. And like, that was really cool. And after a few months of doing that, one of the panels that I had attended was a Women in Games International panel with another person. And so I wrote an article for Geek Mom based off that, and a couple other articles on like, you know, how to play Magic the Gathering without having the bro style attached to it. You know what I mean? Like, make it a little bit easier for
Accessible.
yeah, a little bit more
Yeah.
accessible, you know what I
Bit
mean?
accessible.
Like,
You don't have to wear a black trench coat and look like you're in the rejected Matrix. It's like, here we
yeah.
go. Yeah.
Every time I've gone to Friday Night Magic, I've been very intimidated by the atmosphere, and a lot of comic shops in general, which is a whole other conversation. But But so I started writing a lot about that, and then I went to this panel. I wrote about the Wiki panel, and Joni reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I really liked your article that you wrote. Will you come blog for us?" And I was like, "Sure." The more conversations we had, the more she was like, "Wait a minute, you have this skill, you have this skill, you have this skill, you have the ability to do this." We started building the Twitch channel. It just became apparent that like I had all of these things that I could offer on top of just blogging that had all the skills that I had acquired up in my life up to that point had pretty much prepared me to do, being able to network with people in the industry when I didn't really know a lot of people, but every single person on my LinkedIn I have had a conversation with. So some people will be like, "You have 1,200 connections." Yep, I've talked to every single person on there because I wanted to make a genuine impact in the industry and be authentic and show up and say, "Hey, I am a person. I am here to be, connect with other people. I'm here to like do whatever it is that you need to help support this career path I've decided I'm going on." And so, and it's just step after step after step after that. I think that the gaming industry in and of itself is really intimidating on paper and it's really intimidating in the media. But once I started coming in to make these connections, everybody was so supportive with me. Everyone was really nice to me. Everyone was like, "Hey, what do you need?" I mean, not that I didn't get a couple like come write for us for free or come, like I got those too, but like a majority of the conversations and the instances I've had personally when getting into the industry professional side of it has been welcoming and very supportive. It's when for me, gamer culture, it's the other side of it that can be a little bit like intimidating, you know what I mean? Especially since
So
I play
yeah, let's
Halo.
yeah, no. So here's the thing, because it's like industry culture is one thing, and then there's basically consumer gamer culture, which
Right.
seems to be like the people who make it and the people who consume it at times sometimes feel like they're living on two different planets, and then at the
Yes.
same time, there's some bridges that connect it. I'm curious about this for you. Look at your journey, you look at what it took to get here. With the other people that are trying to follow, would like to be in the position you're in or try to get there, what advice would you have for them? Like how can someone get into this space in a way that's not, like, I don't know, hardcore, that makes you feel like, what am I doing here?
So you don't feel like a filthy casual? Is that what?
Well, I was going to say it that way, but it's going to be like you just, I mean, look, I mean, it's just, it's one of those things because, like, I
That's
put it this way,
that's
like,
yeah.
we need more. Listen, we need more people, more everyday folks. We need people who want to be here, that want to participate. It can't just all look like I'm opening up a pack of marshmallows. It needs to look like everything
Oh,
else
for
too.
sure.
You
Oh,
know what I
for
mean?
sure.
So,
Yes. Yes.
we need to have all,
Yes.
all the good, more of a pack of Skittles, less marshmallows. How
I
do we
love
do
that.
that? You know?
One of the biggest misconceptions about I feel about women in the gaming industry is that women the term gamer. Let's start with that. The term
Yeah,
gamer, I know
definitely.
we all use it. The term gamer at this point is kind of redundant. It's almost like saying movie watcher or
Yeah.
music listener
I'm a
or
cinemaphile.
exactly. Exactly. And so I mean, especially if you look at like Kojima's work, right? Kojima's work is all cinematic. It's all bridging that gap between what is art, what is movie, and what is gaming. And I think that the culture in and of itself is going in a place where gaming is literally just how we consume content now.
Yeah, it's just a
And
medium.
it's another medium. And for women, I think one of the biggest struggles is that I have tons of mom friends that do not consider themselves gamers, yet they play video games every day. They play TTRPGs since they were. I have a friend who's played Dungeons and Dragons for years. She's been a Magic the Gathering player since she was 7. And she's been playing The Sims since she was 12, and she plays almost every Bethesda game she can get her hands on. And this woman refuses to call herself a gamer because she is a mom of 2 neurodivergent boys and doesn't see herself in that category. And so I think number one is kind of getting rid of that term in a sense where it's dividing people from people that consume games in a hardcore kind of niche culture kind of way versus people who like to play games. Gaming is it's overlapping into so many different mediums.
I mean, look at
Number
Wordle.
one.
I mean, this
Right.
Wordle thing, literally the New York Times just did an acquisition in games.
Right.
They bought a
Right.
game. I mean, it's like, so there you
Exactly.
go. I mean,
And so many companies that are non-endemic to the space are jumping in, like Opie Nail Polish that did that thing with Halo.
totally.
There's all of these because they're realizing that it's just another medium for the younger generations. Like my kids are growing up playing in Roblox studios, making their own worlds, which I realize is a privilege for them, and to them it's just normal.
Yeah. No,
You
I
know,
totally hear you.
so I think the first thing is understanding that number one, the gaming industry isn't just for gamers, and it's not just for people that play video games either, because we need, like you said, that outside perspective. I want someone that's going to come from a non-gamer background to come in to help me figure out how to better reach those people, or how to better, connect with them, kind of thing. um for sure. And then I think the other thing too is that what it takes to be in the gaming industry, there are so many roles that we don't even know exist. Like Assassin's Creed needs historians. Like
Absolutely.
a
Yeah.
game that is based on, same with Fable, same with all of these games that are based in these worlds. Yeah, they're building these worlds, but these worlds have to have real physics. They have to have real life
Hmm.
scientific boundaries, or else it doesn't feel immersive enough. It doesn't feel real. They've done studies on this, right? So we need writers, we need artists, we need, and not just 3D artists, we need illustrators, we need we need all sorts of people from all walks we need medical professionals, because there are plenty of games that have to do with the medical field that could use consultants and things like that. So it doesn't really matter what you want to do in the industry, especially right now. You can find something that works for what you do and what your skill set is.
Well, and so this is the thing too, because I think you hit it on right on the head. It's like there are so many positions in this industry that have absolutely nothing to do with the core competency of, like, I am a programmer, I'm a designer, I'm an artist. There are the cultural consultant, there's a historian, there's the physics, there's the engineer, like say, physical engineer. There are producers, there are people who need to organize, people who need to basically administer. There's all these positions, and yet at the same time, as an industry, it sometimes feels like we do a horrible job educating people about other jobs that exist in the industry that don't necessarily fall underneath the idea of what a gamer is, but it is a job, a real skill set. Do you think this is an issue because we don't have those really cool making ofs? Do you remember like movie magic, when they used to talk about how movies were made on TV, like on TLC? They're like, here's how we made this movie.
Yeah.
Is it just the fact that we don't have these vignettes about, here's how we made this game, and here's someone who looks like you, and you know what, this is like, how everyone's like, I'm a grip, and it's like, now we know the grip's the one who moves the cables around. Like
Right.
we don't do that. If we
Yeah.
did that, do you think that would help? Would we be able to express to people, like, out of the 1,000 jobs created for this one Assassin's Creed,
Hmm.
these are all these people you didn't even know were working on it? Do you think that would
Right.
make a difference?
I think I think that leads to a bigger conversation about the state of content nowadays, because are those things out there? Yes. Are we all watching the same channels of content anymore? No. So like when we were growing up, it was TV, cable, and we were all watching the same kind of things.
Yeah, totally.
Now everybody has their own personalized screen. So
True.
like even my kids, their YouTube search is going to look very different from mine, and so if I want to access that content, I have to go looking for it. It's not going to be something that I stumble upon naturally unless it's already in my wheelhouse. And I think that that's where partnerships and strategic, you know communities creating each other can help, because like people who like Halo obviously wants to reach a wider market with that partnership, because the people that they're trying to reach may not necessarily stumble upon Halo on their own, because it's not in their siloed content that they consume regularly. um, so really putting content in their face like that would be the way to kind of fix that. But like that's really like a state of content in the society kind of conversation, I feel like,
No,
too.
absolutely. And you break something up regarding communities I want to get into. Like, how do you think the metaverse is going to impact communities? I mean, let's
I have so many opinions on the
I know. Well, let's
metaverse.
open it up. I mean, it's like, because like I'm curious. It's like, I
Ah,
mean, we live in a fractured society. We live in a niche of a niche of a niche. You know what? I can get any
yeah.
crazy that I like, whatever it is that I like. But how do you think? I mean, so hey, let me ask you: are you a metaverse? Do you believe that there is a metaverse? That this metaverse, the
Shoot.
concept is coming? Let's start there, and then we can deep dive into it. Where are
Okay.
you on the scandal?
All right. So, in order to fill that, let's get some context here. I have
What's
been playing
context?
MMOs since Final Fantasy 11 came out.
Oh, you're OG. You are
OG.
OG.
I am a Legacy 14 member. I only pay $9.99 for my subscription.
Wow.
I am like, so when it comes to topics about metaverse and NFTs and things like this, I feel like the elder gamers, which apparently is what we are struggling in this kind of, because I've already been in a metaverse. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, I
totally.
was in Vanadiel with all of my MMO players. I was in Eorzea with all of my MMO players. And so, like, as a remote worker, someone who works 2 jobs remotely, thinking about having to spend my time grinding in an office setting, similar as if I would grind in an MMO setting, like, really, I'm not, I don't need to be in a virtual office with my coworkers to get work done, right? Like, I'm
Totally.
fine with voice chats or whatever, or hanging out over, like this. I think that maybe there are some people in generations that need that, like, I'm going to be in an office with you and that makes me feel something. But for me personally, I am having a hard time. Like, I understand that this is the where they want the future to go, but for me, for example, like, if we're talking about video games and how video games are all going to be in the metaverse, does that mean our characters are going to be restricted to what we physically are able to do? And then what's the conversation around accessibility when it comes to people who need those accommodations, or on the other side of the coin, is there even going to be disabled representation in the metaverse, or are we all going to be able-bodied, avatars of ourselves walking around? Like, what are, I guess, I always look at things from, like, that type of perspective, like, who is going to be inevitably left out of the conversation.
Well,
Um,
I don't know if anyone's going to be left out, and here's why. Because I don't necessarily think that the avatars will be human. I
that's
think it could
possible
be
too.
like a floating bottle of Pellegrino. Someone
It's
could be a
true.
lipstick. Someone could be Pikachu's eye.
Good points. Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
so
yeah.
from that perspective, it's like it's almost what do they call it? Anamorphic in a way, where they basically we embody something.
Yeah.
We end up basically taking and making animals
Yes.
that can talk, and I think that's where it goes because in the end, why be human?
This is
We've
very
already
true.
we've already proven that. I mean, what's the point? I mean, and I think
Yeah,
that from
yeah.
that perspective, it's like, and I mean it from this way where it's like I think you're totally right. It's like who will be left out, and I think that's the reason why the way it's being built is no one will be left out because this is not going to be we chose your avatar for you. You choose whatever that
Right.
avatar is.
True. True. But then, on the other side of
Yeah,
that,
please go ahead,
is
please.
everyone gonna choose the avatar of the century? Like, we see how trends work, right? We see
That's
how
true.
trends work in social media. We see how trends work in cosmetics and
Hmm.
glamours. We have a blueprint to kind of lift off of when it comes to these type of things. But I think that for some reason, the conversation about the metaverse is being kept so distant from the conversation about, like, online gaming, that it's almost weird to me that the two haven't had more overlapping than what I've been seeing in.
No, I think it's interesting you say that because I think there's a reason for this, and I think that honestly, it's something that comes down to the idea of OG gaming meeting technology, right? So let's be
Yeah.
clear about that. How the metaverse's vision is two things. There's the tech, we're in high technology. We are the people who create software and create all this consumer products for you. Their version, and then there's like I'm a gamer. I grew up in this. I was cutting my wrists on freaking MS DOS and I know what it is and I'm angry that how dare you come shine a light on my dank corner of the society. The reality is that it's not that anymore. All of us are
Oh,
to the
for
point of what
sure.
you said. All the moms, all the dads, all the grandmas, the fact that there's like the fastest growing demographic of gamers are 50 plus, the
Yes.
Wordles of the world. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all our medium. So the
Yes.
reality is we're all at the table at that moment in time.
Yes.
So I think that reason why we're not discussing it, it's not because we don't want to. I think it's just because you have to have an adult conversation at that point. And that's kind of hard if you're like, you never accepted me. It's like, okay, you know
Yeah.
what? I'm
Yeah.
not 14 anymore. So, we can get past the fact that, my life was Twilight or, she never called me or he never called. I mean,
Oh
guys,
my
it's like,
gosh, right?
we got to get past that. It's like,
Yeah.
we're all here now. So
Yeah.
But maybe that's just it. Maybe that's the conversation that we do need to have, which is like, look, you know what? It's better when we all play together. Because that's
Yes.
honestly what this is about anyway. We all
Yes.
connect it together, right? Huh.
Absolutely. And I think that so like it's a similar feeling for me when I mean like yeah, esports is huge right now, right? Esports is growing, esports is continuing to grow. In the past couple years, paying attention to esports discourse has been really kind of in that same area because as someone who has ties to my Korean culture, I've watched Korea built their esports stuff, right?
It's amazing.
Since I mean, they had an Air Force
Yeah.
StarCraft team when I before I was pregnant with my son and he's going to be 9 this week. So like they're way ahead of us. They have been way ahead of us. And to see the conversations online being like, "Oh, we're pioneering the space. Nobody has ever done this before." Like I think that's where I get like, "All right, like
That's where you just show them a map and say, like, do you see this other area that's not in this little footprint called the United
yeah."
States?
And it
They
was
did it
like
too.
and it's funny because I did a keynote speaking thing for I think it was ESI over in Korea. They had their GES in Busan, and we did it virtually. And it was a very interesting talking to all the people that were on the panel because we're all kind of in the same boat. Like Asia has been doing this,
Yeah, forever.
and the language around it for America's side of it is just kind of like, oh yes, we're starting and this is great and we're pioneering the space and no one's ever done this before and we're brand new, and it's like, okay, yes, yes, but also no. And like, so I think there's a lot of like running in blind that doesn't necessarily need to happen if we were more open about the conversations we were having across all of the board, like you said. Like I think if we were talking about the metaverse in a way that acknowledges the similarities between gaming and the metaverse instead of trying to act like the metaverse is a whole new concept that no one's
Exactly.
ever thought of before. I
Hmm.
think that being transparent and authentic is 100% always the way to go. And we're seeing it a lot with the NFT space too. Like, yes, there are tons of authentic, very transparent companies, very much people that want the space to be well and sustainable, but they're getting drowned out by all of the other conversations and chatter that are happening by people that might have more resources.
I think I hearing you talk, and I love what you're saying because there's a part of it that actually is, well, it's all true. And I think there's one thing that I find funny is the fact that when you look at the idea of metaverse, we literally need to use the word metaverse because no one wants to use, at least from a corporate side, video games. Nobody wants to say that video games is why the metaverse happens. Video games and video game technology, video game design, video game craft, video game art, video game community, video game technology is why the metaverse happens. It's not because people change their name. It's not because basically tech companies come in one day and say, oh, we got a brilliant idea. It comes from video games.
Right.
And I think that's the part where if we don't want to be appropriated as an industry, because I know that's what it is. That's the anger. We're like, oh, we're being appropriated. They don't understand the struggles inside. Well, then we need to talk. And
Yeah.
then we need to say, hey, look, guys, we're so happy you're coming.
Right.
Why don't we show you all of the suspension of disbelief and craft that we've built over 40 years and help
Mm-hmm.
apply that towards what your challenges are,
Yes.
as adults do. But
Right.
rather, let's brood and, no one knows the anger inside. And I hate to put it that way, but
Yeah.
like, honestly,
Yeah. It's
that's what
true.
it
It's very
feels like.
angsty. It's
It's
very
angsty. No,
angsty.
seriously. I'm like, I should put on like, I'm gonna put on some Operation Ivy or basically Rancid and let's angst out because nobody knows the pain. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
We know
Yeah.
you know what? It's like, how about we realize besides the pain, we could lead the change and the
Right.
transformation and
Well,
define it for ourselves.
I think when it comes to our generation specifically, so much of our generation has tied their identity to pop culture in order to be able to feel relevant, seen, whatever it is,
Oh,
whether
that's deep.
that's the
Hmm.
fashions of the 2000, you know what I mean, music, whatever media it is.
Yeah,
And
totally.
we see this in the nostalgia like kind of cycle, right? We see this. So I think that when it comes specifically to gamers, I think that and we've seen this actually a little bit in like the TTRPG space too, honestly, with what Wizards is doing with D&D and a lot of that same kind of like we're switching things up, we're kind of being more inclusive and more accessible, is that like they're holding on to this pain and anguish from that's actually related more to like childhood trauma that has to do with that era
Yep.
than it is anything to do with that topic, you know,
Yeah.
like
It's
it took me
PTSD.
yeah, as a girl in the space, because this is a big common thing amongst women in the gaming space that I've seen in my as a player, not necessarily the industry, but as a player, a lot of girls like become like that one girl that hangs out with the guys that plays video games too, that feels the need to prove themselves consistently to everybody around them because you know they don't feel validated, they don't feel seen. And I feel like male gamer culture is now entering into that kind of space because of all the NFT and metaverse and conversations that are happening. They're now like, oh wait, what about us? Like we want to be seen. And they don't know how, they've never been in that position, while women are like, okay, we pivot, like
Yeah,
cool, we want
totally.
to be seen, like we're gonna pivot to be seen, like, and men
We're
just
gonna be
haven't.
resilient.
Right, when men
Yeah.
haven't been in that position yet, these men that are kind of in this space. And so I feel like the metaverse is a good thing. I just feel like this weird distancing from the video game history prevents a lot of that growth for those people that are still holding on to it, because I
Yeah.
think that they're reliving that trauma of not being good enough, not being seen, not having their things validated,
Yeah.
because you know we are now in positions of power to be able to create more of like the My Little Ponies and the Ninja Turtles and the things that we had when we were younger, and the metaverse is just another kind of product of that.
Yeah, no,
But
totally.
it's not presenting itself that way.
Well, and that's the thing. It's the idea that it's getting appropriated without our involvement, and that basically triggers the trauma of like, well, you didn't talk to me anyway, so why did I think it was going to happen anyway? So
Right.
I'm gonna go back to my little dank corner and basically sit there and brood. Now, I'm not trying to be
Yeah.
basically dismissive because I mean, that's where I'm from. I grew up in that place, but I also
Right.
realized something: unless you speak up, it's never going to happen. And so, I want to tap in on something that you said that it's really important to me. I mean, I have a daughter. She's 7 years old. I've been gaming with her since she was 2. Princess Peach was the first thing she played. Her and I played Super Mario 2 together.
I
I
love
loved it.
that game.
I love it. It's actually my out of the all the original NES games, Super
Yeah.
Mario 2 is one of my fondest memories. So being able to play with her was important to me, and watching her play and helping and from being supportive of her not being afraid and basically getting into tech computers and technology
Mhm.
programming, and she's doing super well on that. And her being like, I don't want her to be the only girl playing, you know what I mean?
Right.
I don't want it to be like, she's that one girl that hangs out with all the guys. It's like,
Right.
I mean, cool if that happens, but at the same time it'd be nice for there to be more.
Right.
There are people listening out there, and I know a lot of the guys listening, we all have daughters. We're trying to figure this things out and trying to
Mhm.
basically do it. And we try in a way where I'm like, hey, my daughter, I'm like, here, let's play Ghost of Tsushima. Let me teach you how to kill Mongols. And she's like the master killer. Then my wife's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, she's really good at it. And I love it, because I'm like, here we go, we can play. And then of course, then sometimes we're playing basically Minecraft, and we're playing doggy daycare, which is kind of like,
Yes.
I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
thank you, doggy daycare. Let's go back to Ghost of Tsushima. Let's kill, let's kill, let's kill. You know what I mean? But I'm like there.
Yeah.
But as someone who's come through this, and honestly, obviously, I'm going to ask you for some parental advice here. As a guy raising a daughter in the games industry who wants her to go all the way through and not feel different, like,
Yeah.
hey, I don't think she should be. She should just do whatever the hell she wants. But what would you tell us for all of us that are like, dude, we don't want our kids to feel like they're not a part of this, you
Yeah,
know?
for sure. So I went through it and I'm watching my daughter go through it. And I have to say, I am so thankful for some of these YouTube like family channels, like we watch a lot of A for Adley, and I don't know if you're probably familiar with Shunders. He owns Space Station Gaming, and he has an esports gaming like kind of space too. But A for Adley has done a lot in terms of like they watch father and daughter play Roblox together. They watch, you know, so it's yes, like we can do everything we can in our power to support, and very much I also have a similar issue when it comes to like Minecraft is so boring. Like I can deal with Minecraft like once in a while, but like sitting there decorating houses, unless it's The Sims and I can do destruction, it's not for me.
I know.
So
Like,
it's so hard for me to also not be like, hey, let's farm on mommy's Final Fantasy 14 character instead, right? Like let's do I need
let's go
rabbit
grind
skin.
for gold so we can go buy that new samurai sword. I'm like, come on, let's go. Like,
So
body count.
So my daughter recently, you know, Halo Infinite came out, and I am a huge Halo fan. I've been playing Halo since Halo 1. LAN parties back in the day, the basement with like 4 Xboxes. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. I got you.
That's my multiplayer history. So we've been playing a lot of Halo, and we've always been very adamant. Mama has her own console and her own username. Daddy has his own console and his own username. And I know that seems very like dogmatic to some people, but I need to be an example to my kids when I'm setting boundaries, and I also need to do it by showing them. I could tell my daughter that she has a right to be a person all I want, but if I'm using my husband's same ID account, I know it sounds really trivial, but that's just
your point, though.
one little thing, right?
Totally,
right?
I get you.
Like,
you're right.
And so she has her own ID and her own profile on every console. You know, when Halo Infinite came out, I had access on my PC. He didn't have access to play it, so we were fortunate enough to be able to grab an Xbox so that she could see us both independently playing together. That's just the tip of the iceberg, though. Like what you do in your household is just the tip of the iceberg, because I am very adamant to my daughter that you are the same. You know, we're the same, we have different skill sets, everybody is different, especially since my son is autistic. She watches him kind of have an easy, like I pulled him out of school because she was seeing the visible difference between how he was being treated in remote school than versus how she was being treated, and I didn't want her to associate his neurodivergence like supports with the fact that he's a white male in society. So one of the first things I did is I pulled them out of school because her being forced to do work that her brother was being given cookies to just exist for was in and of itself a power dynamic I didn't want her to have access to. The other thing too is that there's one day having conversations and asking them what they think and what they're observing is really important. Totally. My daughter one time told me that she couldn't turn off the TV because she's not a boy, and I was like, she was 4 at the time, and you've had this, you know me, like I'm like, where did this, like how did this get in my house?
Where did this fiction come from? I mean, honestly, no, I get you.
I will break a jar before I hand it to somebody to open for me if I have to. Okay,
absolutely.
Like, what? So that we immediately stopped and we had the conversation. Like, why do you feel that way? What is it about that you feel? And we're going through the same thing now with like, she's acknowledging that her brother is autistic, and so you know what that means and how he perceives the world. And so being a physical example is better than telling people what to do. Totally. You know, and that even goes into far as like screen time, right? I don't have screen time locks, but I am fortunate enough to be a gamer, so we lead by example. Oh, I'm too tilted to play this right now, we're gonna stop. Or and then we have conversations about it when it happens, and we're showing our kids by example how we physically are doing the thing. Especially when it comes to being a father, supporting your daughter. From my experience as a daughter, I would say that the best thing my father ever did was play games with me. And the other thing that he did that was really impactful in my life is that we lived on Air Force bases when we lived in the States. When we lived in Korea, we lived off, but when we lived in here, we lived on. And my dad would he was so impressed by my gaming skills that he would invite his friends over to try to beat me in Tetris.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
And so I've
Yeah.
rekindled, since he's passed, I've rekindled with people that were in his, like, in that military life that are like, oh yeah, I remember you. You were the Tetris girl. Like, and I was like, yep, that's me.
Well, that's actually very smart. I really appreciate you sharing that because, like, I play right now Mario Kart. I have my Switch, my daughter has hers, and we
Yes.
compete like
Yeah.
nonstop. And she's so good at it. And her brother,
Yeah.
he's 2. He's picking up the Switch, trying to get on there, and I'm like, okay, I think there's going to be a third one here, and we're going to basically just grind and play and go through this. And it is something that I will say that I love watching her teach her brother how to game.
Yes.
That part is the part that I'm like, teach your brother, show him how you do it, and for there be no fear. And I think that's something that when I look at her, especially her scores in math, and this is a dad moment, so I'm going to brag tough. It's my show. Basically, like she's scoring off the charts, math and engineering, and her programming skills are. I'm like, I can't believe this, but it's also because she loves gaming and she's only now becoming aware that we make games. And I think that's like, it's like her, I'm waiting for the moment where her friends find out, but basically, like, I know she's like, we make this. I go, yeah, take a look. Here's Little Button from Bacon Switch, and oh yeah, take a look at the characters from Street Fighter, and she's playing them, and I can see that process kind of coming in there, and I'm just like, I don't know, I love it because I just want her to go off and do everything right. So no, I appreciate you being honest with us and sharing us what you think we can do, because I mean, honestly, I think it's something that, especially for the guys in the games industry, the guys that actually go off and try to do this, it's like we don't talk about these things, but we kind of should, because it's not like we don't
Yeah.
have kids.
Yeah. And I think that too is that we take for granted how much they soak up. Like, we can, I can have the conversation all I want with my daughter, but if she doesn't, and she's really clever too. Like, oh my gosh. She asked me one time, she was like, Mama, can I have ice cream before lunch? And I was like, you can have a spoonful of ice cream, okay? Because she has selective mutism. So when she asked me for something, I try to be like, really responsive. And I was like, you can have a spoonful of ice cream before lunch. And she was like, okay, perfect. She goes over to the drawer, pulls out a half cup measuring spoon, and was like, this is the spoon I choose for my ice cream. And I was like,
Yeah,
I gotta give it to her,
you gotta give it to her.
I gotta
Yeah,
give it to her. So she even will make comments like, now she's gonna be 7, and it's my mom. She's a great harmony, but she's traditional Korean woman. So my daughter is the only girl out of all of her grandchildren. So my daughter is treated immediately like the princess whenever my mother is around. And it's a lot of like conversations to combat that, But this year for Christmas, she was like, why did Brand get Legos and I didn't get Legos? And I was like, I don't know, babe. Like, and now we have to have these conversations about how other people perceive gender and how it, and it's, so I think that always keeping the conversation open is really good. And it's easy. I mean, I hate to say it, it's easy when they're young, because you, especially as a dad, like, you're number one dude in your life. You're the person that's teaching her how to. This is the thing I think people just need to remember. You as the parent, like, I'm having a hard time wording it because this is all wrapped around like heteronormative like culture, you know what I mean? Like, but as a father who has a good relationship with his daughter, which is what I had in the beginning with my dad growing up to a certain point, the most important thing he could have ever done was just let me know that like I was normal, that I was okay, that I was safe, that like it didn't matter what my context was in the world versus what other people, I knew my context, I knew where I came from, I knew my culture history, I knew my ethnic history, I knew my family history, and nobody else could shake that, right? So when these boys were coming at me in high school questioning my gamer clout or whatever it was, and I was like, dude, I had to pull out all my receipts to be part of the club. When my teachers would tell me that I failed a test, my dad used his white privilege to come in there and say, nope, this is the history book she is learning from. This is military history. This is, like, it didn't matter what happened to me. He would always back me up, until it got to a point where it was like, past his traumatic experience. You know what I mean? I think we all
Yeah,
hit points
totally.
as
No,
parents
absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
we have to do growing ourselves. And
Yeah.
so he supported me as much as he could up until that point. And then he had the growing to do. And I think that's another important part, is just remember that as a parent, we always have growing to do.
Yeah.
And every single parent in the world says they tried their best. And we all know, as people that grew up from children, how that affects us and how that affects who we are today. And I think just taking that into account in all aspects of how you interact with your kids. And I also think that parents who game have very much an advantage on parenting than parents who don't, especially in this generation. But I've taught my kids so much just by playing The Sims with them.
Yeah. No,
This is how
absolutely.
when you should shower. This is why you should shower. This is what happens when you don't shower. You know what I mean? Like, here,
Yeah.
you can see it. So I think that just making it a normal every day, and then keeping those conversations open, because she's going to look for representation of herself.
Yeah.
And she's
Totally.
not going to see it. That's the thing.
No, you're totally right. Well, and that's actually interesting about that, because I think one of the main things we do is like we take what we do in gaming and then we apply it to just everyday life. Like when I had them clean the room yesterday, I'm like, oh yeah, look, this is like Roblox, or this is like Minecraft. Pick it up, start breaking, put them away
Among Us
now.
tasks.
Yeah.
Among Us tasks have done wonders. Forget it. What are our tasks today?
Exactly. What are the tasks? It's fantastic. Jenn, honestly, we could talk for hours, and I want to have you back
Really
on the
good.
show. I really appreciate your time. I know there are people out there, they're going to want to follow you and learn more about you. What are your social tags? How can we follow, learn more, and keep up with you?
Okay, so I have kind of so on Twitter I am Jenn Geeky. On Twitch I am Youngles, Youngles, and on February 6th I am premiering an actual play of Mothership RPG on my friend Todd Moonbounce's channel. So you can come watch me make a fool of myself there too.
No, please send us the details, and we'll make sure to link that in there. Honestly, Jenn, thank you again for coming to Video Games Real Talk. You're always welcome. And for everyone out there,
Thank you for having me.
yeah, no, well, thank you. Thank you for coming. And for everyone, we will be back again next week with another episode of Video Games Real Talk. You can follow us on Twitter at StarvUp or at VGRT, videogamesrealtalk.com. Of course, tell your friends about us. Tell us what you think about us. Love it, hate it, or anything in between. Feel free to let us know. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.